The conference room on the third floor of the county courthouse smelled like old wood polish and stale coffee. Outside, the morning sun painted downtown Milford in shades of amber and gray, casting long shadows across Main Street. District Attorney Marcus Brennan stood at the window, watching the traffic crawl past the historic brick buildings that had stood since the town's founding in 1887. His reflection stared back at him. Sharp suit, perfectly combed hair, the kind of face that photographed well for campaign posters. Brennan turned to face the four people seated around the conference table. Two reporters from the Milford Gazette, a camera operator from the local news station, and his press secretary, Jennifer Walsh, who sat with her tablet ready, fingers poised to document every word. He cleared his throat. The sound cut through the morning quiet like a gavel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on such short notice. What I'm about to share with you will change the landscape of public safety in this county. Brennan moved to the head of the table, placing both palms flat on the polished surface. For years, a certain motorcycle club has operated in our community with impunity. The Iron Patriots. You know them. Everyone knows them. They parade through our streets every weekend, their engines roaring, disturbing the peace, intimidating law-abiding citizens. One of the reporters, a young woman named Sarah Chen, raised her pen. Mr. Brennan, the Iron Patriots have been in Milford for over 30 years. They've never been charged with any serious offenses. In fact, they organize the annual toy drive and Veterans Memorial Ride. Brennan's smile was thin, calculated. That's exactly the kind of public relations smokescreen I'm talking about, Sarah. These men hide behind charity work while engaging in activities that threaten our community's fabric. I have credible evidence linking them to intimidation tactics, illegal assembly, and creating a climate of fear. The camera operator adjusted his lens, the red recording light steady. Starting today, Brennan continued, my office will pursue aggressive legal action against the Iron Patriots Motorcycle Club. We will seek injunctions to prevent their gatherings. We will scrutinize every business associated with them. We will send a message that Milford is a town of law and order, not a haven for organized groups that operate outside societal norms. Jennifer Walsh typed rapidly, already drafting the press release that would hit social media within the hour. Sarah Chen leaned forward. Have any members of the Iron Patriots been arrested recently? What prompted this sudden action? The time for tolerance has passed, Brennan said, avoiding the question with practiced ease. I'm announcing my candidacy for State Attorney General next month. My platform will be built on community safety and accountability. Milford will be the example of what strong leadership looks like. There it was, the real story beneath the rhetoric. Marcus Brennan wasn't fighting crime. He was building a campaign. The press conference lasted another 20 minutes. Brennan spoke in sound bites designed for evening news cycles. He referenced vague statistics, unnamed sources, and painted a picture of a town living under the shadow of leather-clad outsiders. He never mentioned that the Iron Patriots had been founded by Vietnam veterans in 1989. He didn't talk about how they'd rebuilt the community center after the fire in 2015, or how they escorted elderly residents to medical appointments when the county bus service was cut. He certainly didn't mention that the club's president, a man named Frank Ironside Morrison, had personally saved his daughter from a riptide during a beach vacation 3 years ago. By noon, the story had spread across every local platform. The headline from the Gazette read, DA declares war on motorcycle club. The accompanying photo showed Brennan pointing at a map of Milford, red circles marking the Iron Patriots clubhouse and the homes of several members. 12 miles across town, in a converted warehouse that served as the Iron Patriots headquarters, Frank Morrison sat at a scarred wooden table, reading the article on his phone. Around him, the clubhouse hummed with quiet activity. Tools clanged in the garage bay where members worked on their motorcycles. Someone was making coffee in the small kitchen. The American flag hung on the far wall, flanked by photos of fallen brothers and military service medals displayed in shadow boxes. Frank was 62, with silver hair pulled back in a ponytail, and hands that bore the scars of 4 decades of mechanical work and military service. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, moved across the screen with growing disbelief. Boss, you seeing this? The voice belonged to Raymond Ray Coleman, the club's vice president. Ray was younger, mid-40s, built like a linebacker, with a neatly trimmed beard and reading glasses perched on his nose. He held his own phone, the same article glowing on the display. I'm seeing it. Frank's voice was low, measured. He set the phone down carefully, as if it might shatter. Question is, why now? Why us? A third man approached the table. Marcus Doc Henderson, the club's road captain and former Army medic, pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. It's political theater. Brennan's running for state AG. He needs a villain, and we look the part. We look the part, Frank repeated, almost to himself. He glanced around the clubhouse. Photographs lined the walls. Charity rides, toy drives, memorial services, community barbecues. 23 members currently active, each with a story. Veterans, mechanics, small business owners, fathers, grandfathers. Men who'd chosen brotherhood over solitude, service over selfishness. The Iron Patriots weren't angels. They were loud. They drank beer. They rode motorcycles that sometimes woke the neighbors. But they'd never hurt anyone. They'd never broken the law beyond the occasional speeding ticket. What do we do? Ray asked. Frank stood up slowly, his leather vest creaking. The patches told his story. Military ribbons, chapter insignias, years of service to the club. We do what we always do. We keep our heads down, stay respectful, and let our actions speak. And if that's not enough? Doc's question hung in the air. Then we trust that this town knows who we really are. But Frank Morrison underestimated Marcus Brennan's ambition, and he had no idea that the city's reaction would become something neither of them could have predicted. By evening, Brennan's press conference had been picked up by state news outlets. The narrative was simple and compelling. Brave prosecutor takes on dangerous biker gang. The nuance, the history, the truth. All of it buried beneath sensational headlines and carefully edited video clips. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. In a world full of noise, this is where real stories of courage and community are told. Stories that remind us who the true heroes are. Don't miss what happens next. The next morning, Frank woke at 5:30, same as always. His small house on Maple Street sat quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. He made coffee, black and strong, and sat at his kitchen table listening to the news on the radio. The anchor's voice was crisp, professional, detached. Local District Attorney Marcus Brennan announced a crackdown on what he calls organized motorcycle clubs operating outside the law. The Iron Patriots Motorcycle Club, based in Milford, has been specifically targeted. Brennan claims the group engages in intimidation and disrupts community peace. Frank switched off the radio. Through his kitchen window, he could see his neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Pacheco, shuffling down her driveway in a bathrobe to collect her newspaper. She was 84, lived alone since her husband died, and Frank mowed her lawn every Saturday without being asked. He pulled on his leather vest, the weight of it familiar and comforting, and walked outside. "Morning, Eleanor." She looked up, squinting against the rising sun. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe, or fear. Frank felt it like a punch to the gut. "Morning, Frank." Her voice was quieter than usual. "Everything okay?" She clutched the newspaper tighter. "I saw the news. They're saying things about you and the boys." "I know. It's not true, is it? The things they're saying?" Frank stepped closer, keeping his voice gentle. "Eleanor, how long have I lived next door to you?" 12 years. "In those 12 years, have I ever given you reason to fear me?" She looked down at the newspaper, then back at Frank. Her eyes, clouded with age but still sharp, searched his face. "No, never. You've been nothing but kind. Then trust what you know, not what you hear." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I do trust you, Frank. But people talk, and when important people say things on television..." Her voice trailed off. Frank understood. Authority had weight. A man in a suit behind a podium carried credibility that a man in a leather vest never would, regardless of truth. "I understand," he said. "Just remember, we're still the same people we were yesterday, the same people who've been here for over 30 years. He walked back inside, the brief conversation leaving him unsettled. If Eleanor, who knew him, could doubt, what about the rest of the town? At the clubhouse, the mood was tense. Members filtered in throughout the morning, each bringing new pieces of information. Social media was ablaze with opinions. Some defended the Iron Patriots, citing years of community service. Others, influenced by Brennan's rhetoric, called for action. The comment sections became battlegrounds of competing narratives. Ray paced the garage bay, phone pressed to his ear. When he hung up, his expression was grim. That was the owner of Milford Metalworks. He's canceling our workshop rental. Says he can't afford to be associated with us right now. The workshop where we restore motorcycles for veterans? Doc asked, incredulous. The same one. Frank rubbed his temples. Anyone else pulling back? Henderson's Hardware won't sponsor the toy drive this year. Another member, Tommy Reeves, spoke up from the corner. Said his corporate office is nervous about the optics. The dominoes were beginning to fall. Brennan's accusations, though baseless, carried the power of his position. People who'd worked alongside the Iron Patriots for years were suddenly distancing themselves, protecting their own interests. This is what he wants, Frank said quietly. Divide us from the community. Make us isolated. Then we become the villains he's painted us as. So what's the play? Ray leaned against a workbench, arms crossed. We fight back, someone suggested. Hold our own press conference. Get our story out there. Frank shook his head. We're not politicians. We're not good at that game, and Brennan knows it. Anything we say will be twisted, edited, used against us. Then what? We keep being who we are. We show up. We serve. We prove him wrong with actions, not words. It was a noble plan. But Frank didn't know how quickly things would escalate or how the city would ultimately choose its side. That afternoon, Brennan filed legal motions. The paperwork hit the court system like a hammer, injunctions seeking to ban the Iron Patriots from public gatherings, restrictions on where members could meet, investigations into every business transaction associated with the club. The language was dense, bureaucratic, designed to overwhelm and intimidate. Frank sat in the office of Sarah Chen, the reporter who'd questioned Brennan at the press conference. Her cubicle at the Milford Gazette was small, cluttered with notebooks and coffee cups. She'd called him, said she wanted to hear his side. Off the record, she started, pen poised above her notepad. What's really going on here? Frank leaned back in the uncomfortable plastic chair. Brennan is building a campaign. We're the props. He claims he has evidence of intimidation tactics. Care to comment? I'd love to see this evidence. In 30 years, Sarah, not one member of the Iron Patriots has been convicted of a violent offense. Not one. We've had speeding tickets. One DUI back in 2008. Guy lost his patch for it. But intimidation? Creating a climate of fear? It's fiction. Sarah wrote quickly. He's also suggesting your gatherings constitute illegal assembly. We meet at our clubhouse, which we own. We ride our motorcycles, which are legally registered. We've never needed permits because we've never blocked traffic or caused disturbances. Every charity event we've organized has been coordinated with the city. Why do you think he's targeting you specifically? Frank paused, considering how much to reveal. 3 years ago, Brennan's daughter nearly drowned at Ocean Crest Beach. I pulled her out. We were there for a Veterans Memorial ride. I didn't know who she was at the time, just saw a kid in trouble. Sarah's pen stopped moving. He never mentioned that. No, and he won't. Doesn't fit the narrative. The article Sarah Chen published the next day was balanced, thorough, and included Frank's perspective alongside Brennan's accusations. But it was buried on page 6, overshadowed by more sensational coverage from larger outlets that had picked up the story without investigation. The Iron Patriots attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Ortiz, reviewed the legal motions in her downtown office. She was in her late 30s, known for taking on cases others avoided, and she worked from a cramped suite above a Thai restaurant. The smell of basil and lemongrass drifted through the heating vents. This is aggressive, Rebecca said, spreading the documents across her desk. Brennan's throwing everything at you, hoping something sticks. Frank and Ray sat across from her, their leather vests looking out of place among the law books and filing cabinets. Can he actually shut us down? Ray asked. Legally? It's complicated. He'd need to prove imminent danger to public safety, which he can't. But he can tie you up in court for months, drain your resources, damage your reputation beyond repair. That's the real goal. How do we fight it? Rebecca tapped the documents with a manicured nail. We respond to every motion. We demand discovery. Make him show this so-called evidence. We demonstrate your community involvement, get character witnesses, document every charitable act. We build a counter-narrative. How much will this cost? Frank's voice was steady, but worry creased his face. More than you want to pay, but I'll work with you on fees. This isn't just about your club anymore. It's about whether someone with power can destroy good people just to advance their career. Frank nodded slowly. Then we fight. Outside Rebecca's office, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street. Frank and Ray walked to their motorcycles parked at the curb. A group of teenagers passed by, and one of them, a kid maybe 17 with a Milford High Letterman jacket, pointed and whispered to his friends. They all looked at Frank with expressions mixing curiosity and apprehension. Frank remembered when kids used to wave at the motorcycles, excited by the rumble of engines and gleam of chrome. Now they stared like he was something dangerous. Ray noticed it too. This is getting worse. It'll get worse before it gets better, Frank said, swinging his leg over his bike. But it will get better. He started the engine, the familiar roar a small comfort in an increasingly hostile world. They rode back to the clubhouse through streets that suddenly felt less like home. That evening, Frank attended the weekly Rotary Club meeting at the Milford Community Center. He'd been a member for 15 years, rarely missed a meeting. The center's multi-purpose room smelled like coffee and floor wax. Folding chairs formed a semicircle around a podium. Usually about 30 people showed up. Tonight, only 20 chairs were filled, and Frank noticed the empty seats around where he usually sat. The club president, a retired dentist named Gerald Hoffman, called the meeting to order. His eyes found Frank, held contact for a moment longer than comfortable, then moved on. The meeting proceeded with usual business: fundraising updates, community project proposals, treasurer's report. When they reached open forum, Gerald cleared his throat. Before we adjourn, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. His gaze shifted to Frank. The recent news coverage has put some of our members in an uncomfortable position. Several have expressed concerns about the club's association with organizations currently under legal scrutiny. The room went quiet. Frank felt every eye turned toward him. He stood slowly. Gerald, if you have something to ask me, ask it directly. Gerald's face reddened. It's not personal, Frank, but the Rotary Club's reputation is built on community trust. If the district attorney's office is investigating the Iron Patriots for criminal activity, then the Rotary Club should wait for actual evidence before passing judgment, Frank interrupted, his voice calm but firm. I've been a member here for 15 years. In that time, the Iron Patriots have partnered with this club on the food bank drive, the literacy program, and the Veterans Support Initiative. Our money has been good enough for your fundraisers. Our labor has been good enough for your community projects. But now, because a politician running for higher office needs a scapegoat, you're ready to cast us out? A woman in the second row, Linda Patterson, who ran the local library, spoke up. Frank's right. We shouldn't rush to judgment based on accusations alone. But another voice countered, we can't ignore what the DA is saying. He has access to information we don't. The debate fractured the room. Some defended Frank, citing years of positive contributions. Others argued that perception mattered, that association with controversy could damage the Rotary Club's standing. In the end, no formal vote was taken, but the damage was done. The trust, once solid, had developed cracks. Frank left the meeting early, the weight of isolation pressing down on him like physical force. He rode home through streets lit by flickering street lamps, past houses where families sat down to dinner, past the diner where he used to grab breakfast every Sunday, past the park where the Iron Patriots had built a playground in 2017. Everything looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. Marcus Brennan sat in his home office, reviewing polling data on his laptop. His campaign manager had sent preliminary numbers, name recognition up 12 points, favorability climbing among conservative voters who responded well to law and order messaging. The Iron Patriot strategy was working exactly as planned. His daughter Emma appeared in the doorway. She was 16, with her mother's dark hair and his blue eyes. She held her phone, screen glowing. Dad, did you really say all this stuff about the motorcycle club? Brennan glanced up. Emma, you know I can't discuss ongoing investigations. This isn't an investigation. It's you going after people on TV. She stepped into the office, phone extended. I've been reading about them. They do charity work. They help veterans. One of them saved my life. Brennan's expression hardened. That's an oversimplification of what happened. Is it? Because I remember a man diving into the water when the lifeguard froze. I remember him pulling me to shore. I remember Mom crying and thanking him. Emma, his name was Frank Morrison, and now you're trying to destroy him. Brennan stood, moving around his desk. You're too young to understand the complexities here. These men might do good things publicly, but that doesn't mean they're not involved in concerning activities privately. What activities? What proof do you have? I don't have to justify my professional decisions to a 16-year-old. Emma's eyes filled with tears of frustration. You always said to stand up for what's right, to be grateful to people who help you, but you're going after the man who saved my life because it's politically convenient. She left before he could respond, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. Brennan stood alone in his office, Emma's words echoing in the silence. He pushed the doubt away, returned to his laptop, to the polling data that justified everything. The campaign required sacrifices, even if one of them was honor. The following Saturday, the Iron Patriots had scheduled their monthly group ride, a tradition that dated back to the club's founding. They'd submitted route plans to the city, secured the necessary permits, and publicized the event as a fundraiser for the local homeless shelter. Riders would collect donations along the route, ending at Memorial Park for a community barbecue. Brennan had other plans. At 8 in the morning, as the Iron Patriots gathered at their clubhouse, preparing their motorcycles and checking equipment, a convoy of police vehicles arrived. 6 patrol cars, lights flashing, followed by a van from the County Code Enforcement Office. Sheriff Tom McKenzie stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was in his late 50s, career law enforcement, and he looked uncomfortable. Behind him, a young officer held a stack of paperwork. Frank walked out to meet them, Ray and Doc flanking him. Tom, Frank greeted the sheriff with wary familiarity. They'd worked together on multiple community safety initiatives over the years. Frank, Mackenzie's voice was tight. I've got orders from the DA's office. Your permits for today's ride have been revoked pending investigation into alleged safety violations. What violations? The young officer shuffled papers, reading from a legal document. Failure to provide adequate traffic control personnel, insufficient insurance documentation, and concerns about group size exceeding municipal code for public assembly. Ray stepped forward. We've done this ride for 15 years. Same route, same setup. We've never had a single incident. I'm just delivering the message, Mackenzie said, and there was genuine regret in his eyes. The DA's office has also sent code enforcement to inspect your clubhouse. They're claiming potential zoning violations. As if on cue, the code enforcement officers began photographing the building, taking measurements, documenting every detail. This is harassment, Doc said quietly. Mackenzie nodded slightly, a gesture so small it could be denied later. File a complaint. But for now, the ride is canceled. Frank watched the police and code enforcement officers swarm his clubhouse like ants on a dropped sandwich. Other club members emerged, faces ranging from angry to defeated. This was the moment Brennan wanted, the Iron Patriots looking cornered, aggressive, dangerous. Stand down, Frank said loudly, addressing his members. Everyone stay calm, don't give them ammunition. It took every ounce of discipline built over decades of military service and brotherhood leadership. But the Iron Patriots complied, watching silently as their clubhouse was documented, cataloged, and scrutinized. By mid-morning, news cameras had arrived, tipped off by someone in Brennan's office. The images that aired on the noon broadcast showed police surrounding the motorcycle club headquarters, officers examining the property, bikers standing outside with crossed arms and hard expressions. The optics were exactly what Brennan had orchestrated. But something unexpected began to happen. In living rooms across Milford, people watched the coverage. They saw Frank Morrison standing calmly, saw the way he kept his members from escalating. They saw Sheriff Mackenzie's reluctant execution of orders. They saw code enforcement officers finding nothing because there was nothing to find. And some of them remembered. Eleanor Pacheco, Frank's elderly neighbor, called her daughter in Hartford. They're going after that nice man who helps me. The one who fixed my furnace last winter when I couldn't afford a repair. Linda Patterson, the librarian, posted on the community Facebook group. I've worked with the Iron Patriots on literacy programs for 5 years. They've donated thousands of dollars and hundreds of volunteer hours. This persecution is wrong. Tommy Chen, Sarah's father and owner of Chen's Hardware, the store that had canceled its toy drive sponsorship, sat at his kitchen table feeling sick with shame. His son had been in a car accident 2 years ago, trapped in a crushed vehicle. The Iron Patriots had stopped, used their tools to pry open the door before emergency services arrived. Tommy had written them a thank you letter. Now, under pressure from corporate offices and afraid of controversy, he'd abandoned them. He picked up his phone and started typing an email to the Milford Gazette. At Milford Elementary School, Principal Janet Martinez walked through the halls, passing the playground that the Iron Patriots had funded and built. She remembered the dedication ceremony, remembered Frank Morrison in his leather vest, kneeling down to let a kindergartner try on his motorcycle helmet, the child's laughter bright and pure. She opened her computer and began drafting a letter to the editor. At the Veterans Affairs office downtown, Counselor Michael Torres thought about the Iron Patriots' monthly support group meetings held at their clubhouse, a safe space for former service members struggling with transition to civilian life. He'd referred dozens of veterans there over the years. Many credited the Brotherhood with saving their lives when VA services fell short. He picked up his phone and called the local news station. One by one, across Milford, people who'd been silent began to remember. They remembered actions, not accusations. They remembered help freely given, compassion offered without expectation of return, strength used for protection rather than intimidation. The city was beginning to choose its side. And Marcus Brennan was about to learn that you can control a narrative for only so long before truth demands its own voice. By Monday morning, the Milford Gazette's letters to the editor section had exploded. Sarah Chen arrived at work to find her inbox overflowing with submissions. She printed them out, spreading them across her desk like cards in a strange, emotionally charged game of solitaire. From Janet Martinez, elementary school principal. In my 30 years in education, I have rarely encountered a group more committed to child welfare than the Iron Patriots. They funded our playground. They volunteer as reading buddies. They've never asked for recognition, only the opportunity to serve. District Attorney Brennan's accusations are not only false, they are a betrayal of people who give selflessly to our children. From Michael Torres, VA counselor. The Iron Patriots provide support services that government agencies cannot or will not fund. They have created a brotherhood that has quite literally saved lives. To characterize them as a threat is to fundamentally misunderstand both the club and the veterans it serves. From Tommy Chen. I made a mistake. When pressure came, I abandoned people who once saved my son's life. The Iron Patriots were there in our family's darkest moment, and I repaid them with cowardice. I am ashamed, and I am correcting that mistake now. They deserve our support, not our silence. The letters kept coming. Teachers, business owners, parents, veterans, elderly residents who'd received help with home repairs or yard work or transportation to medical appointments. Story after story. Testimony after testimony. A collective voice rising in defense of men who'd never asked for defense. Sarah began compiling the responses into a feature article. This was the real story. Not sensational accusations from an ambitious prosecutor, but the lived experience of a community that had watched the Iron Patriots' actions for 3 decades. Her editor, a gruff man named Bill Kowalski, who'd run the paper for 40 years, read over her shoulder. This'll make waves. Should I be worried about legal pushback? Bill snorted. From who? These are citizen testimonials, Sarah. Published letters to the editor. If Brennan has a problem with his constituents speaking their minds, that's his issue, not ours. The article ran on Wednesday's front page. Community Speaks, Milford residents defend Iron Patriots. The online version went viral within hours, shared across social media platforms, picked up by regional news outlets who'd initially only covered Brennan's accusations. The narrative was shifting. At his campaign headquarters, Marcus Brennan read the article with growing alarm. His campaign manager, a sleek political operative named Richard Voss, paced the office, phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp with damage control. Yes, I understand public opinion is turning, but we have momentum. No, listen to me. We position this as ordinary people being manipulated by a sophisticated PR operation. Yes, That's exactly what I'm saying. Brennan barely heard him. His eyes kept returning to one line in Sarah Chen's article, a quote from his own daughter. Emma Brennan, daughter of the district attorney, declined to comment officially, but shared via social media that she will always be grateful to the man who saved her life, regardless of what politics requires others to claim. His daughter had publicly rebuked him. Jennifer Walsh, his press secretary, entered with a tablet showing social media metrics. The hashtag #DefendIronPatriots is trending statewide. We're getting buried in negative comments. Your favorability ratings have dropped 8 points in 3 days. How is this happening? Brennan demanded. We control the narrative. We have the authority. We had the narrative, Walsh corrected. But stories beat statistics. Emotion beats authority. And right now, the emotional momentum is against us. Richard Voss ended his call and turned to Brennan. We need to pivot. Fast. Either find actual evidence to justify the persecution or find a graceful exit. There is no evidence, Brennan said quietly. There never was. The Iron Patriots are exactly what they appear to be. A motorcycle club that does charity work. The room fell silent. Walsh spoke first, her voice carefully neutral. Then why did we target them? Brennan's laugh was bitter. Because they looked the part. Because voters respond to law and order campaigns. Because I needed a villain to build a hero story around. Jesus Christ, Marcus, Voss muttered. Can we kill this quietly? Brennan asked. Drop the investigation, claim we've resolved the concerns, move on to another issue? Voss shook his head. Not anymore. It's too public now. Anything less than a full exoneration will look like a cover-up. You either see it through and prove your case in court, which you can't, or you admit fault publicly. Admitting fault ends my campaign. So does losing in court. At least admitting fault preserves some integrity. Brennan stood, moving to the window. Outside, Milford continued its daily rhythms. Traffic, pedestrians, the ordinary flow of a small city. He'd grown up here, built his career here, planned to use it as a launching pad to state-level politics. Now, that dream was crumbling because he'd underestimated the power of community memory and the weight of truth. At the Iron Patriots clubhouse, Frank read the Gazette article 3 times. Each time, his throat tightened with emotion he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, certainly. Relief. But also a profound sadness that it had required this much effort, this much public outcry, just to defend what should have been obvious all along. Ray leaned against the wall, arms crossed, reading the same article on his phone. We're winning. Are we? Frank set down the newspaper. We shouldn't have had to fight in the first place. The fact that we're celebrating not being destroyed feels wrong. Doc entered with 3 bottles of water from the small refrigerator, distributed them. The attorney called. She says Brennan's team is signaling they might drop the case. Might? Nothing official yet, but the legal pressure is mounting. Between the public backlash and the complete lack of evidence, continuing the prosecution becomes untenable. Frank twisted the cap off his water bottle, took a long drink. Through the clubhouse windows, he could see several motorcycles parked in the lot, chrome glinting in afternoon sunlight. Each bike represented a man who'd found brotherhood here, who'd chosen to belong to something larger than himself. I want to make a statement, Frank said suddenly. Ray looked up. To who? Everyone. The press, the community, Brennan. We've been silent, letting our actions speak. But maybe it's time we spoke for ourselves. The idea took shape over the next few hours, not a press conference. That felt too formal, too much like playing Brennan's game. Instead, they'd hold an open house at the clubhouse. Invite the entire community. Let people see who the Iron Patriots really were, not through news reports or legal documents, but through direct interaction. Sarah Chen agreed to publicize the event. The Gazette ran an announcement, Iron Patriots Open House, meet your neighbors. The following Saturday, Frank arrived at the clubhouse at 6 in the morning. By 7, other members had joined him, and the work began. They cleaned the garage bay, organized the common areas, set up tables in the parking lot. Someone brought a grill. Another member baked cookies with his daughter, a 10-year-old who'd been asking what all the news coverage meant. At noon, people started arriving. Eleanor Pacheco came first, carrying a casserole dish wrapped in aluminum foil. I made my arroz con pollo, she announced. If people are going to judge you, at least they'll do it on full stomachs. Linda Patterson brought her teenage son, who was writing a school report on community service organizations. Tommy Chen arrived with his entire family and an official letter re-establishing Henderson's Hardware's sponsorship of the toy drive. Veterans trickled in, men and women who'd attended the support groups, who'd found community when the official systems failed them. Parents whose children had benefited from the Iron Patriots youth programs, teachers, coaches, small business owners. Janet Martinez arrived with a framed photograph from the playground dedication ceremony. She presented it to Frank with tears in her eyes. "This belongs here," she said. By mid-afternoon, over 200 people filled the clubhouse and surrounding area. Frank stood at the center of the garage bay, overwhelmed by the turnout. Ray nudged him. "Say something." Frank climbed onto a workbench, the makeshift podium putting him above the crowd. Conversations gradually quieted. Faces turned toward him, faces of every age, background, story. He cleared his throat. 30 years ago, a group of Vietnam veterans came back to a country that didn't quite know what to do with them. They'd served, fought, lost friends. They came home to protests and silence. So they found each other. They built something, not perfect, but real. A brotherhood based on service, loyalty, and the belief that strength should protect, not dominate. His voice carried across the garage, through the open doors to the parking lot where people stood listening. "We never wanted attention. We just wanted to belong, to matter, to give back to communities that gave us purpose. For 30 years, we've tried to live by a simple code. Show up, help where you can, ask for nothing in return. We're not heroes. We're just men who believe that duty doesn't end when you take off the uniform." He paused, seeing nodding heads, people wiping eyes. "Last week, someone tried to tell you who we are. Someone with authority, with power, with a platform. He painted us as dangerous, as threats, as something to fear. And for a moment, it seemed like that narrative might win because authority carries weight. But you remembered." Frank's voice grew stronger. "You remembered the actions over the accusations. You remembered specific moments, help freely given, compassion offered, strength used for protection. You chose to defend us when we couldn't defend ourselves. You chose to speak truth when silence would have been easier. That's what community means. Not agreement on everything, not perfection from anyone, but collective memory of who people actually are versus who someone claims them to be." I'm going to pause here because I need to create a moment in the narrative where I ask you to do something. If you believe in the power of community standing against false accusations, if this story has touched you, leave a comment saying, "I stand with truth right now." Let's see how many of us believe in defending what's right. Don't scroll past. Comment now. Frank stepped down from the workbench, and the crowd erupted in applause. Not polite golf clapping, but genuine, sustained recognition. People pressed forward to shake his hand, to share their own stories, to express gratitude. Emma Brennan stood at the back of the crowd, having arrived quietly, alone. She'd taken the bus from across town, not telling her father where she was going. She watched Frank Morrison accept thanks from an elderly couple, saw him kneel to talk to a small child, observed the way he listened more than he spoke. This was the man who'd saved her life, and her father was trying to destroy him. She pulled out her phone and started recording a video. At his home office, Marcus Brennan scrolled through social media, watching the real-time updates from the Iron Patriots open house. Photos, videos, testimonials. The community had chosen its side, and it wasn't his. His wife, Catherine, appeared in the doorway. She'd been quiet about the whole situation, navigating the tension between supporting her husband and recognizing the injustice of his actions. "Emma's not home," she said. "Where is she?" "The Iron Patriots clubhouse. She's live streaming from their open house." Brennan's stomach dropped. He pulled up his daughter's social media and found the video. Emma's voice narrated over footage of the event. "My dad says these men are dangerous, but I'm here, standing among hundreds of community members who know better. These are the people who saved my life, who built playgrounds, who help veterans, who show up when others won't. And my father, the person who taught me to value truth and honor, is trying to destroy them for political gain." The video had been live for 20 minutes. Already thousands had viewed it. Brennan closed his laptop slowly. The walls of his office seemed to contract, the air growing thin. Everything he'd built, the campaign, the reputation, the carefully constructed image of a crusading prosecutor, was collapsing under the weight of his own daughter's truth-telling. Catherine watched him quietly. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." Her voice was soft but firm. "You know exactly what you need to do. The question is whether you have the courage to do it." Brennan looked at his wife, saw the disappointment in her eyes, and realized he'd been seeing that same expression mirrored in faces throughout Milford. His constituents, his colleagues, his family. All of them waiting to see if Marcus Brennan would choose integrity over ambition. The choice had always been clear. He'd just been avoiding it. That evening, Brennan called an emergency meeting with his campaign team. Richard Voss arrived expecting strategy discussions. Jennifer Walsh brought polling data. They gathered in Brennan's home office, the same room where he'd launched his assault on the Iron Patriots weeks earlier. Brennan stood at his desk, hands flat on the polished surface, mirroring his stance from the original press conference. "We're dropping everything," he said without preamble. Voss froze. "What?" "The investigation, the legal motions, the entire campaign against the Iron Patriots. We're ending it. Tonight." Walsh leaned forward. "Marcus, we can still salvage this. The open house was good PR for them, but they don't need PR. They have truth. We have accusations based on nothing." Brennan's voice was steady, resolved. "I'm calling a press conference for tomorrow morning. I'm publicly apologizing and withdrawing all actions against the motorcycle club." "That ends your campaign," Voss said flatly. "My campaign ended the moment I chose politics over people." Brennan looked at his team, saw their calculation, their assessment of damage and opportunity. "I'm not asking for your support. I'm informing you of my decision. If you want to resign from the campaign, I understand." Voss gathered his papers. "You're making a mistake. In politics, admitting fault is fatal. Then maybe I'm not cut out for politics." Voss left. Walsh hesitated, then placed her tablet on the desk. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing, even if it costs you everything." She left too. Brennan sat alone in his office, the silence profound. Through the window, he could see lights throughout Milford, each one representing homes, families, lives that intersected in this small community. He'd tried to use that community as a stepping stone to power. Now he would use his remaining power to correct the injustice he'd created. The next morning, the same conference room where Brennan had launched his attack became the setting for his surrender. The media turnout was larger this time. Word had spread that something significant was about to happen. Sarah Chen sat in the front row, recorder running. Camera operators positioned for optimal angles. Marcus Brennan entered at exactly 9 o'clock. No press secretary, no campaign manager, just him in a simple suit, carrying a single sheet of paper with handwritten notes. He stood at the podium, gripped its edges, and began. 3 weeks ago, I stood in this room and made accusations against the Iron Patriots Motorcycle Club. I claimed they posed a threat to our community. I used my authority as district attorney to initiate legal actions designed to shut them down, to silence them, to exile them from the town they've served for 30 years. He paused, looking directly at the cameras. I was wrong. Completely, unequivocally wrong. The room erupted with furious note-taking and whispered reactions. There was no evidence. There was no threat. There was only my ambition and my willingness to sacrifice good people for political advantage. I targeted the Iron Patriots because they looked like villains I could campaign against. I ignored their decades of service, their charitable work, their genuine commitment to this community. Sarah Chen's pen moved rapidly across her notepad. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing all legal actions against the Iron Patriots Motorcycle Club. All investigations are closed. All restrictions are lifted. They are free to continue their work without interference from my office. Brennan's hands trembled slightly on the podium. Furthermore, I am ending my campaign for State Attorney General. I don't deserve the opportunity to represent the people of this state when I couldn't honorably represent the people of my own community. A reporter from the state network raised his hand. Mr. Brennan, what prompted this reversal? My daughter. Brennan's voice caught. She had the courage to stand up for what was right when I didn't. She reminded me that being saved by someone creates an obligation, not a political opportunity. Frank Morrison pulled her from the ocean 3 years ago, and I repaid him by trying to destroy his life. Another reporter. Will you resign as district attorney? That's up to the voters in the next election. I'll serve out my term and let the community decide if I deserve to continue. He folded his notes, hands steadying. I want to specifically apologize to Frank Morrison, to the members of the Iron Patriots, and to everyone in Milford who watched their district attorney abuse his power. You deserved better. You deserve leaders who serve truth, not ambition. I have one final statement. To anyone watching who has been falsely accused, who has been judged on appearance rather than action, who has felt the weight of authority used unjustly against them, I see you now. I failed you. And I'm sorry. Marcus Brennan left the podium and walked out of the conference room, past reporters shouting questions, past cameras capturing his exit. He drove straight to the Iron Patriots clubhouse. Frank was in the garage bay working on a vintage motorcycle when Ray called out that someone was at the door. Frank set down his wrench, wiped his hands on a rag, and walked outside. Marcus Brennan stood in the parking lot. No entourage, no security, just a man in a suit looking smaller than he had on television. Can I have a moment? Brennan asked. Frank studied him, then nodded. They walked away from the clubhouse toward the chain-link fence that bordered the property. Behind them, curious club members watched from the garage entrance. I saw your press conference, Frank said. I meant every word. Brennan struggled to maintain eye contact. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not here to ask for it. I just wanted you to hear directly from me that I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Frank crossed his arms. Why'd you do it? The real reason. Ambition, fear, the belief that the end justified the means. Brennan's voice was hollow. I saw a narrative that would advance my career, and I convinced myself it was righteous. I forgot that people aren't plot points in someone else's story. You almost destroyed us. I know. Some of the damage can't be undone. Relationships fractured, trust broken. People who abandoned us when things got hard. They showed us who they really are. I understand. Frank turned to face Brennan fully. Emma's a brave kid. She did what you should have done weeks ago. She's a better person than I am. Maybe. Or maybe she just remembered that courage means standing up even when it costs you something. Brennan nodded, accepting the rebuke. Is there anything I can do? Anything to help repair what I broke? Frank considered. You've already done it. You told the truth publicly. You used the same platform you used to attack us to defend us. That matters. But words are just the beginning. The real test is what you do next. How you lead from here. Whether you learned anything from this, or whether you'll make the same mistake with different targets. I learned. Brennan's voice was firm. I learned that authority without integrity is just legalized abuse. That communities remember actions longer than accusations. That truth, given enough time and enough voices, will always surface. Frank extended his hand. Not friendship, not absolution, but acknowledgement. Brennan shook it, the grip firm, brief. Your daughter saved your soul, Frank said. Don't waste that gift. Brennan nodded and walked back to his car. Frank watched him drive away, then returned to the clubhouse where Ray and Doc waited. What did he want? Ray asked. To apologize, to try to become the person he pretended to be. Think he'll succeed? Frank picked up his wrench, returned to the motorcycle he'd been restoring. That's not our call to make. We just keep being who we are. The rest sorts itself out. The Iron Patriots returned to their work, their rides, their quiet service. The news cycle moved on to other stories. Brennan served out his term as DA, declined to run for re-election, and eventually took a position teaching ethics at the state university. Emma Brennan went on to study law, motivated by watching her father's fall and redemption. Sarah Chen won a regional journalism award for her coverage of the story, specifically for her commitment to seeking truth beneath sensational accusations. The Milford community healed slowly, the wounds from division gradually scarring over. The Rotary Club extended a formal apology to Frank and reinstated the Iron Patriots' partnership on community projects. Henderson's Hardware not only resumed sponsorship of the toy drive, but increased their contribution. Eleanor Pacheco continued to receive help with her lawn, her furnace, her grocery shopping. She baked Frank cookies every Christmas, always the same recipe, always delivered with the same gratitude. On the first Saturday of every month, the Iron Patriots held their group ride. The permits were never again questioned. Children waved as the motorcycles passed. The sound of engines rumbling through Milford streets became not a threat, but a reminder. A reminder that appearance and reality are often different, that authority must be tempered with integrity, that communities possess collective memory stronger than individual ambition, that truth, defended by enough voices, will prevail. 6 months after Brennan's apology, Frank stood in Memorial Park during the annual Veterans Memorial Ride. Hundreds of motorcycles lined the park's perimeter. Families spread blankets on grass, children ran through open spaces, the smell of barbecue drifted on spring air. Frank watched it all, this community he'd served for 3 decades, and felt a profound sense of peace. Not because the battle had been won. There would always be other battles, other prejudices, other misunderstandings. But because when it mattered, when truth faced power, the community had chosen correctly. Ray approached, handed him a bottle of water. "Big turnout this year. Biggest yet. Think Brennan's watching the coverage?" Frank shrugged. "Doesn't matter. This isn't about him anymore. It never really was." What was it about? Frank watched a little girl chase a butterfly across the grass, her laughter bright against the rumble of distant motorcycles. It was about every time someone chooses what's right over what's easy, every time a community defends its own, every time truth gets louder than lies. Pretty philosophical for a mechanic. Frank smiled. 30 years of wrenches and leather teaches you things. As the sun set over Memorial Park, casting long shadows and golden light, the Iron Patriots gathered for their traditional closing ceremony. They stood in formation, leather vests and patches and scars from lives fully lived. No speeches, no performances, just a moment of silence for fallen brothers and sisters, followed by engines starting in synchronized thunder. The community watched, understanding now what they should have understood all along, that strength and compassion are not opposites, that appearance and character are not the same, that judging based on sight rather than action is the easiest mistake and the costliest one. Marcus Brennan, watching from his living room television, saw Frank Morrison shake hands with the mayor, saw children cluster around motorcycles, saw a community united rather than divided. He thought about the man he'd tried to destroy and the man he'd become in the process. His daughter entered the room, sat beside him on the couch. "You watching?" "Yeah." "How do you feel?" Brennan considered the question, seeking honesty. "Grateful. For them. For you. For the chance to learn this lesson before it was too late." Emma leaned against her father's shoulder. "They're having their annual toy drive planning meeting next week. I signed us up to volunteer." Brennan looked at his daughter, saw the challenge and the invitation in her eyes. "Both of us? If you want to rebuild trust, you rebuild it with actions. Just showing up and helping. No press, no statements. Just work." "I'd like that." On screen, the Iron Patriots motorcycles rolled out of Memorial Park in formation, their headlights cutting through twilight. The camera panned across faces in the crowd, some waving, some saluting, all watching with expressions of respect rather than fear. The narrator's voice on the news broadcast concluded, "What began as a political attack on a motorcycle club became a lesson in community memory and collective courage. The Iron Patriots remain what they've always been, ordinary men choosing to serve. And Milford remains what it's always been, a town that remembers actions longer than accusations." Frank rode at the head of the formation, Ray on his right, Doc on his left, 30 brothers behind them. The road stretched ahead, familiar and endless. Streetlights flickered on as darkness settled. Somewhere ahead, tomorrow's challenges waited. But tonight, there was just the road, the brotherhood, and the quiet knowledge that when tested, they'd remain true. The rumble of engines faded into the distance, leaving Milford in peaceful evening. Families returned to homes. Businesses closed for the night. The ordinary rhythms of a small city resumed, altered slightly but fundamentally unchanged. Because the real story was never about bikers or prosecutors or political campaigns. It was about what happens when a community decides that truth matters more than authority, that character matters more than appearance, that standing up for what's right requires courage from everyone, not just heroes. The Iron Patriots would continue their work, rebuilding motorcycles, organizing charity events, supporting veterans, mowing elderly neighbors' lawns. Not for recognition or redemption, but because that's who they chose to be 3 decades ago and who they remained through every challenge since. And Marcus Brennan would continue his work too, teaching, serving, trying to embody the integrity he'd temporarily abandoned. Some mistakes can't be completely erased, only learned from and grown beyond. In the end, both the prosecutor and the bikers learned the same lesson from different perspectives. That power without integrity destroys, that community without memory fractures, and that truth, given enough voices and enough time, will always find its way to light. The city of Milford carried that lesson forward, a collective understanding earned through near disaster and ultimate redemption. The story became part of local history, told to new residents and future generations, not as a tale of heroes and villains, but as a reminder that every community faces the choice between what's easy and what's right, and that choosing correctly requires everyone's participation. Frank Morrison eventually stepped down as president of the Iron Patriots, passing leadership to Ray while remaining active in the club. He continued living on Maple Street, continued helping Eleanor Pacheco, continued showing up wherever he was needed. On his refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a motorcycle, was a photograph from the Memorial Park ride. Hundreds of people, motorcycles gleaming in sunlight, faces filled with joy rather than fear. Beside it, a handwritten note from Emma Brennan. "Thank you for saving my life twice. Once in the water, once by showing my father what integrity looks like." Some nights, Frank would stand in his kitchen, looking at that photograph and that note, and feel the weight of what had been at stake. Not just his club, not just his reputation, but the fundamental question of whether communities could still defend truth against authority when truth wore leather and authority wore suits. Milford had answered that question, and in answering it, had become stronger, more united, more certain of its own values. The motorcycles still rumbled through streets every Saturday, children still waved, Eleanor still made arroz con pollo, the Iron Patriots still showed up, helped where they could, asked for nothing in return. Because that's what communities are built on, not grand gestures or political platforms, but the accumulation of small, consistent acts of service performed by ordinary people who choose to be extraordinary in the quiet, unglamorous work of simply caring. The prosecutor had threatened the biker gang without imagining the city's reaction, but the city had reacted exactly as it should have, with memory, with courage, with the collective voice of truth spoken loudly enough to drown out even the most authoritative lie. And that reaction, more than any legal victory or political defeat, was the real triumph. Because it proved that communities still possessed the power to defend their own, to remember what mattered, to choose character over convenience. The story ended not with vengeance, but with restoration. Not with victory, but with understanding. Not with someone winning and someone losing, but with everyone learning and growing. Frank Morrison turned off his kitchen light and walked to his bedroom, the house settling into comfortable silence around him. Tomorrow he'd wake at 5:30, make coffee, maybe mow Eleanor's lawn if the weather held. The day after that, a club meeting. The weekend, another ride. Ordinary life, extraordinary in its consistency and purpose. That was the real story. Not the conflict, but the resolution. Not the attack, but the defense. Not the prosecutor's fall, but the community's rise. And Milford carried that story forward, a living testament to what happens when people remember that the strongest authority is not power, but truth. That the best defense is not silence, but voice. That the greatest victory is not defeating enemies, but proving they were wrong to attack in the first place. The Iron Patriots continued riding, the city continued watching, and both understood, finally and fully, that they needed each other. The edge and the center, the outliers and the establishment, all part of the same community bound by memory, service, and the choice to stand together when standing alone would have been easier. That was the lesson Marcus Brennan learned too late to save his ambition, but soon enough to save his soul. That was the lesson Emma Brennan learned young enough to carry it through her entire life. That was the lesson Milford taught itself, and anyone watching. Power threatens. Communities respond. Truth prevails. Not because it's easy, not because it's guaranteed, but because enough people choose to defend it, speak it, embody it until lies have nowhere left to hide. The motorcycles kept rolling, the city kept growing, and the story became legend, not the legend of individual heroes, but the legend of collective courage. Because in the end, that's the only kind of legend worth telling. If you watched this far, it's because you liked this case. Leave a comment saying, "I watched this far," so I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories on this channel. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that truth and community still matter, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that ordinary people can still stand up to power when they stand together.